Earlier this week, Michigan football free safety Rod Moore suffered a non-contact ACL tear. And this is extremely unfortunate, especially for Rod Moore, who will likely miss the majority, if not all, of the 2024 season. But it is also unfortunate for Michigan as a team because the secondary was already thin entering spring practice, with Mikey Sainristil and Josh Wallace departing the program. Corner has looked thin, along with nickelback outside of Will Johnson. But I, along with many others, was anticipating that because the two starting safeties from last season, Makari Paige and Rod Moore, along with very critical backup Quinten Johnson, who made a big play in the Rose Bowl, they were returning, along with all the safety depth outside of Keon Sabb, who transferred to Alabama. I thought that the safety room would be one of the best and deepest in the country still. Well, that is now thrown into question with this injury, and I think Michigan not only needs to target a corner in the transfer portal in this upcoming cycle, but also a safety now. But since this is not April 15th, this is not April 20th, this is not the end of the second portal cycle, April 30th, what I want to do is talk about who in the safety room right now can step up and either improve from where they were last year or have a breakout season to help ease the sad injury that has occurred to Rod Moore. Michigan does have depth. They have recruited well defensively, not just on the D-line or at linebacker or at corner, with Will Johnson being the only five-star on the team currently, but they have also recruited well at safety. So that's what we are going to be talking about here today on this episode of College Football with Sam. Welcome back, college football fanatics. Before we resume this video, please click that like button, hit that big red subscribe button, and click the notification bell so that you can get notified when I release more Michigan football, Big Ten football, and college football content. And comment who you think will step up in this safety room to fill in for the injured Rod Moore. It's very sad that he's down. He made a critical interception against Ohio State last season when they were driving down the field in the Big House. He was an all Big Ten player last season. I haven't released my all Big Ten team yet, and I may not even release a video on that until after the transfer portal cycle because anyone can transfer. The courts struck down the NCAA's restrictions on transfers, and Josh Pate was talking about in one of his segments that it's going to be insane, this upcoming portal cycle, and I believe it. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like only teams like Michigan and Georgia and a few other handful of teams that have great cultures and that have recruited and developed very well and that typically tend to pay players to return rather than pay players to come to the school. I feel like they will retain more of their rosters than other schools, but we just don't know right now. We don't. So there's already a lot of chaos. This injury makes things even more chaotic, and it's to one of Michigan's best players on defense, and it really does suck. But I believe in Lamar Morgan. I believe in Michigan's defensive staff. Michigan, even with an entirely new defensive staff, I think is one of the best staffs in the country right now. I'm still looking for that defensive line coach, last I checked. But who do you think will replace Rod Moore? Who do you think will step up? Will Makari Paige have a first-team All-Big Ten or All-American caliber season? Or will Zeke, Quinten Johnson, or even true sophomore Brandyn Hillman step into the role at free safety where Rod Moore was playing? And last but certainly not least, thank you to my patrons for sponsoring this channel and this video. If you want to support the channel and go the extra mile, your support is always appreciated. It is never expected. You do get occasional bonus content, and you get your name featured at the beginning and end of every video. So sign up as an all-conference, all-American, or Heisman member to support the channel. All-Americans and Heismans get access to said occasional bonus content, which will be ramping up in the summer months. But let's dive in. Brandyn Hillman is the youngest player in this safety room that really has a chance to break out and start for the Wolverines, or at least have significant playing time. He was a sophomore this year, or he will be a sophomore this year. He was a true freshman last year. He had very limited snaps in 2023, played in the UNLV and Bowling Green games. At least that's where he recorded a tackle. I guarantee we played in some other games and backup roles. And that's all he had, was 2 total tackles this year. But he has learned from some of the best defensive back players in the country. Michigan's secondary, outside of maybe Ohio State's when totally healthy, Michigan's was the best in the country. And outside of Iowa's, maybe, when it was totally healthy. But how Michigan was able to really dissect Washington's offense was absolutely impressive. Jalen Milroe, early in the year, not a good passer. Later in the year, he was just a master at hitting deep balls. He did not hit a single deep ball against Michigan. He only beat Michigan with his legs. That was impressive. I thought that he was going to do more against Michigan's secondary in the Rose Bowl, but he didn't. And Kyle McCord, he made some big throws, and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Cade Stover made some big catches, but that secondary, from forcing Emeka Egbuka to drop a deep pass, from forcing a fumble, I forget if it was on Egbuka or Fleming, and then the other wide receiver, one of those two, recovered said fumble on the final drive, making 2 interceptions, one by Will Johnson early in the game to set up a 4th and goal touchdown run at the end of that drive, which was only, I think, 9 or 10 yards, and the final interception to seal the game by Rod Moore. That was impressive. I mean, this Michigan secondary was ruthless. It was efficient. Will Johnson is going to be one of the best, if not the best, corners in the game this season. And Makari Paige is a senior entering this year, and Rod Moore has just been lethal at safety. Hillman has learned from all of these players. Also, don't forget Mikey Sainristil, who's been starting at nickelback for the past 2 seasons, and one of the best players on the defense. And last year, he was definitely my favorite defensive player, making all the pick sixes that he did, the interceptions, being a great tackler, and not being afraid of taking risks. This secondary wasn't afraid of occasionally getting burned or surrendering a deep pass play if it meant that they could make a big play. That's a contrast between their secondary and, let's say, Ohio State's, which was pretty conservative for much of the year. Michigan's secondary, I think, was closer to an Iowa-type aggressive secondary rather than an Ohio State conservative secondary. I'm not talking about Hillman much just because we don't know a lot about him. We haven't seen him play a ton. I'm going to say basically the same things for Zeke Berry when we talk about him. But Hillman was nearly a top 100 player in the 2023 recruiting class, a high-level 4-star, and I expect him to be a contributor either this season or next season, and that's just because there is depth ahead of him. Quinten Johnson and Zeke Berry are older, and they're currently listed ahead of him on the ourlads.com depth chart, which has not updated Rod Moore's injury yet, so that injury would likely put Hillman in a second-string position. He should contribute more this year for sure, but depending on if Michigan brings in a transfer or if other players step up, you just don't know yet. But he's being developed by good coaches. He's learned from some of the best. His future's definitely bright. Up next, we have Makari Paige. Makari Paige will be a senior this year, and he's one of the many players on this roster who has never lost to Ohio State. I can't even believe that. It was only, little over, 2 years ago, where I gave my prediction for the 2021 Michigan-Ohio State showdown. I picked Michigan to cover the spread because I agreed with the few voices that I listened to that Michigan had some matchup advantages against the Buckeyes and that this was going to be a hard-fought battle. But I just couldn't see Harbaugh pulling it out, especially with the choke job loss to Michigan State earlier that year. But instead, Michigan went on and they dominated, 42-27. Makari Paige in 2022 had a late-game interception against C.J. Stroud, and this year, he was a big contributor. 41 tackles this year. He also had 41 tackles last year, coincidentally, and he had 2 passes defended as well this season. He's been a key starter over the past 2 seasons at strong safety, and now he is the most experienced player here who will start. And I say that because it sounds like Rod Moore, as I mentioned earlier in the video, won't be playing potentially for the entire season. And you want to rest Rod Moore. You do. You know, if Michigan loses to Texas in week 2, I'd hate that. Michigan fans would hate that. Other fan bases who don't like Texas would hate that. But it's a non-conference game, and a game against, let's say, Ohio State on the road or Oregon at home is more important for the Wolverines, because whoever wins the Big Ten gets that automatic bid to the 12-team playoff, and conference games matter more than ever before compared to non-conference games, just really for that reason alone, the auto bids, and also, of course, the accolades and the pride of the fact that Michigan has a streak of 3 Big Ten championships in a row. And it's just really impressive what Paige has done, and the fact that he has been participating on winning teams every season. 12-2 in 2021 when Paige was a freshman, 13-1 in 2022 when Paige was a sophomore, and now, junior, just this last season, 15-0 in a national championship. And he was an all Big Ten honorable mention in both 2022 and 2023. If he stays healthy, he can and he will do better than that, whether that's third team, whether that's second team, whether maybe All-American status. He was predicted to be one of the best safeties in the Big Ten entering last season by myself and many others, and he was a great player, a part of an elite secondary. Also, 3 years under the development and under the teaching of Steve Clinkscale, one of the best defensive back coaches in college football, now with Jim Harbaugh at the Chargers. You bet that Makari Paige is just one of the best, as long as he stays healthy, and as long as, just really that he stays healthy, and that the new coaching staff isn't garbage, which I don't think they are whatsoever. So that's another candidate, is Makari Paige, who is at strong safety, a different position, but if he steps up and he just has a phenomenal season, maybe you don't have to have elite play at free safety to still have one of the best safety rooms in the country and in the Big Ten. Quinten Johnson, who is projected to be the backup to Makari Paige at strong safety, he's a 6th-year player. He's a veteran. He played even in 2019, a year that Michigan was predicted to win the Big Ten, only the second time they were under Jim Harbaugh. The only other time was in 2023, and unlike 2023, where Michigan fulfilled the preseason expectations, in fact, they exceeded them by winning the national championship when most picked Georgia to do so for the 3rd year in a row, they went 9-4 in 2019 and got blown out by Wisconsin, blown out by Ohio State, blown out by Alabama in the bowl game, and suffered a painful road loss, nearly a comeback win, but a loss nonetheless against Penn State. 6th-year player, plenty of experience. He decided to return after initially declaring for the 2024 NFL Draft. That's a very rare decision. Typically, when a player declares for the NFL Draft, they sign with an agent, and it's hard to come back. It's harder to come back after declaring for the NFL Draft than it is if you're in college basketball and you declare for the NBA Draft. That's more of a common occurrence, that you declare for the NBA and then you return to college basketball after you change your mind. It's much harder to change your mind going from collegiate football, to professional football. But Quinten Johnson's coming back, and that's good news. It was good news before Rod Moore's injury. It's even better news with Rod Moore sadly being hurt, because Michigan needs all the depth and all the experience that they can get, and Johnson's very experienced. Recorded 22 tackles last season, a forced fumble, an interception. That forced fumble was in the game against Alabama. Made crucial plays there, and he had 4 passes defended as well last season. His experience gives him an edge over every other safety in the room. And with Moore being injured, there is a starting spot open, and even if he doesn't start, he will be more in the rotation than ever before. Can he have a breakout year? Typically, you don't see breakout seasons from players who are this old and proven, but you never know. We've seen crazier things happen before. I mean, look at Joe Burrow. came out on the scene final year after being a backup at Ohio State and having an above average year at LSU in 2018, and just came out, and very few saw that coming, if anyone. Can he have a breakout year? Be an all Big Ten, maybe even all American caliber player? Who knows? Those are questions that will be answered in fall. They can't be answered right now. But Johnson is tall, he's long, he's experienced, he's disciplined, and he's learned under the best of the best, just like all of these other players have, but more so him and Paige, because they've had multiple seasons under Clinkscale. But Quinten Johnson, great player. I'm glad to have him back in Ann Arbor, and it would be awesome if he can have that breakout season where everyone's like, you're a sixth year. Why are you doing this now? Could you have not have done this earlier? But now would be the perfect time for him to break out. And finally, we have Zeke Berry. Zeke Berry is going to be a redshirt sophomore. He's received very limited snaps over the past 2 football seasons, highly recruited as a part of the 2022 recruiting class. He's only recorded 4 tackles, but much like Brandyn Hillman, he's played in elite rooms since day one, and he has learned from elite players. He's a 4-star out of high school and developed by Clinkscale, and I expect him to see significant starts this season. I say that because he's projected as the backup, or was projected as the backup to Rod Moore at free safety. And being a redshirt sophomore, now having 2 full seasons of being tutored by Clinkscale and by other safeties in the room like Paige and Moore, and learning and being developed, I think that now's his time to shine. He's in the position that Moore was in, and he was highly recruited at high school. He's played well, and someone has to step up. That's really the whole theme of this video, is someone has to step up. Because Keon Sabb is now at Alabama. He'll be starting there at safety. And Moore going down, Michigan is 2 safeties shorter than what was expected of their depth chart just about a month or 2 ago, when it was announced that Moore and Paige would return. And that was huge. I mean, if Sabb stayed and if Moore wasn't healthy, this would be, with no argument, the best safety room in the country. It would be. Now there are questions surrounding that. There are. And now you look at Ohio State, you look at Iowa, you look at Georgia, you look at these other schools, and right now they have better depth than Michigan does at safety. And with Moore being injured and Keon Sabb leaving for Alabama, I mean, you look at Ohio State with Caleb Downs, they definitely have the higher upside at the position. And it's the same thing with Iowa for Xavier Nwampka, and they have other players there as well who will perform at an elite level. The Big Ten is rich. They have abundant wealth in terms of elite secondary play. And you could say the same for the SEC, though in recent memory there has been a little bit of doubt cast on that. But Berry is a good player, and I'm saying the same things about him that I am about Brandyn Hillman. We just don't know yet. We don't know everything. But learning from the best of the best, playing in deep rooms, practicing with those players, and being highly recruited out of high school, it's much easier to give him benefit of the doubt than to cast skepticism on if he is worthy of starting at a Power 5 program, or now a Power 4 program, on an elite defense like Michigan's. So those are 4 players currently in the safety room, not named Rod Moore, who need to step up in some way to help ease that injury. The safety room is thin, and looking at Michigan's secondary all around, which I've touched a little bit on the cornerback room in this video, but not too much, corner's also thin. Safety, as of now, I'd say is probably the thinnest position, merging both corner and safety. The defensive back room is the thinnest out of linebacker and D-line. D-line, Michigan's D-line, I'm leaning closer to saying that they're the best D-line in the country than not, despite the fact that they lost 3 starters. And at linebacker, Barham's a proven Big Ten linebacker, and Ernest Hausman was a beast as a freshman. He was good last year, and Michigan does have depth in their 4-2-5 defense to rotate players at linebacker. At secondary, I think Michigan has to bring in at least 2 transfers, at least one at corner, one at safety, maybe even more for corner or for nickelback, even though I think Jaden McBurrows is poised for having a breakout year. But those are my thoughts, and that's just looking at Michigan's safety room, and who do you think out of those 4, or maybe someone else that I didn't mention, who do you think will break out at safety in the sad absence of Rod Moore? And prayers up to him. Hopefully he can recover quickly and in the best way possible from his ACL injury. Have a great day, guys, and thank you so much to my patrons for sponsoring this channel and this video. Thanks to Crash2488 for being a Heisman patron. Thanks to Spencer Bringhurst, Chris Lane, and SFS Nerd for being All-American patrons. Thanks to Will Loftus, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for being all-conference patrons. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you soon. If you're listening on Spotify, please follow the channel. Have a great day.